1. The woman who couldn't say no. For most of my life, I was known as Mary, the woman who never said no. I was the one everyone turned to when they needed help. I remember a significant conversation with my daughter, Martha. "Mom, you can't keep going like this," she said, worried. "Every day you wake up at 5 a.m. to make coffee for John, then you go take care of Rose, who's sick. In the afternoon, you help Carmen with the kids, and you still want to handle all the housework." "But sweetie," I replied at the time, "if I don't help, who will? And who's going to help you when you can't take it anymore?" It took a scare for me to understand. One afternoon, I was trying to reach a pot high up in the cupboard to make soup for my sick neighbor, even though my back was complaining. Suddenly, I felt a terrible pain. I fell on the kitchen floor and waited 2 hours for someone to show up. When my granddaughter Julie found me, she cried, "Grandma, why didn't you call me? I could have come to help." "I didn't want to bother you, my love. You have your studies." "Grandma," she held my hand in the hospital, "you always say family is for times like these. Why don't you include yourself in that rule?" Those words touched me deeply. During my recovery, I had a lot of time to think. I began to realize how many times I had ignored my own limits. I remembered the time I had a fever, but still went to bake a cake for the church party. The time my legs were swollen, but I insisted on helping with Martha's move. It was my doctor, Dr. Robert, who gave me another valuable piece of advice. "Mary, you're like a pitcher of water. If you keep serving others without refilling yourself, you'll eventually run dry." Today I've learned to balance. When my grandkids ask me to make cookies, I first check how I'm feeling. If I'm up for it, we have a party in the kitchen. If not, I say lovingly, "Grandma needs to rest today, but how about tomorrow? We can bake together, and you can tell me about your day at school." It was difficult at first. Some people even found it strange. "But Mary, you've always helped everyone," and I respond with a smile, "And I'll continue helping, but now I've also learned to help myself." My friend Dorothy, who's 82 years old, told me something I'll never forget. "Mary, have you noticed that in airplane safety instructions, they always tell you to put on your own oxygen mask before helping others? It's because if you pass out, you can't help anyone." That message stayed in my heart. Today I maintain my volunteer activities at church, help my daughters with the grandkids when I can, make soup for sick neighbors, but I also reserve time for myself. Every afternoon after lunch is my sacred moment. I sit on the porch, do my crochet, drink my tea, and give thanks for life. If someone calls asking for help during this time, I calmly say, "This is my rest time now, but we can sort this out later." And you know what's most beautiful? People started respecting me more. My daughters even created a rotation to help me with the monthly grocery shopping. My grandchildren show up not just when they need something, but to simply spend time with me. As I told my youngest granddaughter the other day, "Alice, Grandma's love, being useful is important, but we need to be useful to ourselves first. It's like watering a plant. If we don't take care of the roots, how will we have flowers to give to others?" She smiled and replied, "Grandma, you're the most beautiful flower in our garden." And so I go on living, learning that true love for others begins with self-love. I haven't stopped being that helpful, Mary. I've just learned that I can help better when I also take care of myself. 2. The fear of aging. Oh, aging. This topic has cost me many sleepless nights. I remember as if it were yesterday the morning I found my first grey hair. It was 1985. I had just turned 40. I panicked. I plucked out the hair and swore I'd buy every hair dye possible. It was my eldest daughter, Beth, who witnessed my despair that day. "Mum, what are you doing locked in this bathroom for an hour?" "I look horrible, Beth. Look, I'm getting old." She sat with me on the edge of the bed and said something I only understood many years later. "Mum, each grey hair represents stories you've lived. They're sleepless nights taking care of us when we were sick, worries about our future and joys too." At the time, I confess I thought it was nonsense. I continued my battle against time. I bought every cream that promised miracles, hid my age when someone asked, avoided taking photos. It was real terror when my birthday came around. There was a time at 60 when my children organized a surprise party. When everyone started singing happy birthday, I ran to the bedroom crying. My grandson Peter, who was only 7 at the time, came after me. "Grandma, why are you crying? Birthday parties are supposed to make you happy." Grandpa is sad because she's getting old, I replied between sobs. He looked at me with that childlike innocence and said, "But Grandma, if you hadn't gotten old, you wouldn't be my grandma, and I'd be very sad without you." Those childish words touched me, but the real change happened after a conversation with Mrs. June, my 92-year-old neighbor. I was complaining about wrinkles when she interrupted me. "Mary, let me tell you something. Yesterday I received news that my friend Carol passed away at 65. You know what she wanted most? To reach 70, to see her grandchildren graduate, to meet her great-grandchildren, and she couldn't. And here you are, complaining about the privilege of aging?" That was like a slap in my face. I started thinking about how many people I knew who didn't have the chance to see their hair turn grey, to gain wrinkles from smiling too much. Now, at 78, I look in the mirror and see each mark with affection. This wrinkle here, it's from laughing so much at family parties. These spots on my hands, they're from hours preparing food for my loved ones. My feet aren't as firm anymore, but they've taken me to wonderful places. Last week, my 15-year-old granddaughter, Alice, caught me putting cream on my face. "Grandma, do you still use those anti-aging creams?" "No, my love. Now I use cream to take care of my skin, not to run away from time. It's different." "How so, Grandma?" "It's like that garden we tend together. We don't prevent the flowers from completing their cycle, but we take care of them to look beautiful in each phase, don't we?" She smiled and started helping me apply the cream. Meanwhile, she told me about school, friends, dreams. I realized that if I was still stuck in that fear of aging, maybe I wouldn't be there, living that precious moment. Last week, I went to my friend Susan's birthday party, who turned 80. She looked beautiful, dancing with her grandchildren, telling stories to her great-grandchildren. At the end of the party, I commented, "Susan, you're radiant." "You know, Mary," she replied, "I discovered that aging is like climbing a mountain. The higher you go, the more tiring it can be, but the view gets more beautiful. And it's true, from up here I can see life with different eyes. I see my daughters raising their children and recognize myself in them. I see my grandchildren growing up and remember my own youth. It's like watching a movie of life, but now I understand each scene better. At my last checkup, my doctor commented on how great my blood pressure was. 'Mrs. Mary, you're healthier than many young people out there.' You know, doctor, I learned that there's no use fighting time. It's better to make peace and walk alongside it. Now I keep my old photos with affection, but no longer with that painful nostalgia. They're parts of my story, just like the wrinkles on my face. As I always say to my friends in the senior group, each age has its beauty. The secret is knowing how to see it. 3. The pursuit of perfection in everything. If there's one thing that made me miss out on many precious moments in life, it was this obsession with wanting everything to be perfect. My house had to look like a hospital. It was so clean. The food had to be restaurant-worthy. The clothes had to be ironed as if they'd just come from the store. I remember one particular Sunday I'll never forget. It was my grandson Luke's birthday. He had just turned 6. "Grandma, look at the drawing I made for you." "Not now, sweetie. Grandma needs to finish setting this table. The guests will be here soon." "But Grandma..." "Luke, later. Go play for a bit. Grandma needs to make everything perfect." I was so busy smoothing the tablecloth for the 1,000th time that I didn't even notice when he left crying. My daughter Sarah called me to the bedroom. "Mom, you need to see this." In the room, Luke had several drawings scattered on the floor. They were all of perfect Grandma, as he had written. In one, I was baking a cake. In another, arranging flowers. In all of them, I was turned away, busy with something. "He spent the whole week making these drawings for today," Sarah said. "He wanted to show you how he sees you." It was like a bucket of cold water had been dumped on my head. At that moment, I looked back and saw how many hugs I'd missed giving, how many stories I'd failed to hear, all in the name of this so-called perfection. My friend Clara, a retired psychologist, always told me, "Mary, perfection is the enemy of happiness. While you're seeking perfection, real life is passing by." But I was stubborn, until the day I had a minor stroke. I spent 3 months unable to do things my perfect way. You know what happened. The world didn't end. My family took turns helping, and even with the house less tidy, with simpler meals, those were the happiest moments. One afternoon, my 12-year-old granddaughter Emily was helping me bake a cake. "Grandma, this cake turned out all lopsided." "It did, my love," I replied, laughing. "But you know what? It'll be full of love, and love doesn't need to be perfect to be special." She hugged me and said, "You know, I prefer Grandma like this. Before, you wouldn't even let us help in the kitchen for fear we'd make a mess." That's when I started to change. I began to accept help, even if they didn't do things exactly my way. I let the kids help in the kitchen, even if it meant flour everywhere. I stopped spending hours tidying the house before visitors arrived. In the church group, Mrs. Nancy shared something that struck me. "You know why God made each person different? Because beauty lies in imperfection. If we were all perfect, the world would be a very dull place." Now, at 78, I see beauty in small imperfections. The cake that sank in the middle, it becomes a surprise filling. The stain on the tablecloth, it's a memory of a happy family lunch. The slightly crooked curtains my great-grandson helped hang, they're my greatest pride. The other day, my youngest daughter commented, "Mom, you're so different, lighter." It's because I finally understood, honey. Life isn't a museum exhibition, it's a family party. It can be messy, noisy, imperfect, but it's real. At our last senior group meeting, we did an interesting exercise. Each of us had to bring something we considered imperfect, but special. I brought a crooked photo frame my grandson made at school. "It's all wonky," I explained, "but every time I look at it, I remember my grandson's smile when he gave it to me, and that's perfect, just the way it is." Last week, I had a surprise visit. The house was a mess. There was laundry to iron, dishes in the sink. In the past, I would have been mortified, but you know what I did? I made coffee, brought out some slightly burnt cookies, and enjoyed the company. At the end of the visit, my friend commented, "Mary, this was the most enjoyable visit I've ever had here. You're different." "It's because I learned that perfection is in the moments, not in things," I replied. Now, when my granddaughters come to visit, the first thing I do is put away that cleaning cloth and sit down to hear their news. The house might not be sparkling, but their eyes when they tell me their stories, those shine like diamonds. And you know what? Life became much lighter when I set perfection aside. As I always say, the moment is perfect, even if the coffee's a little burnt. 4. Information overload and excessive connectivity. Oh, this technology business. When my children gave me my first cell phone, I thought it would just be for making calls. Little did I know that tiny device would become a window to the world, sometimes a window that was too big. I remember the day my son Robert installed WhatsApp. "Mum, now you can participate in family groups." "But son, I barely know how to use this thing." "Calm down, Mum. It's easy. Look." Within days, I was in 15 different groups: family, church, prayer group, crochet friends, choir, exercise class. Every notification made me jump. It was ping here, ping there. There was no more peace. One afternoon I was doing my crochet when a message arrived in the family group. "Urgent, share, eating bananas with milk is harmful." I panicked. I had just given that combination to my grandson, Peter. I quickly called my daughter. "Sarah, for God's sake, take Peter to the hospital. I gave him bananas with milk." "Mom, calm down, that's fake news." You can't believe everything you receive on WhatsApp. That was my first lesson about the pitfalls of the digital world. But it wasn't the last. Soon I found myself addicted to checking my phone every 5 minutes. I lost hours watching recipe videos I'd never make, sharing messages without verifying if they were true. One Sunday afternoon, my 10-year-old grandson Michael caught my attention. "Grandma, you're not even listening to my story. You're just looking at that phone." It was like a slap in the face. I had become what I always criticized in young people. I was missing precious moments because of a device. My friend Dolores, a retired teacher, gave me valuable advice. "Mary, technology is like sugar. A little sweetens life. Too much causes diabetes." So I started creating my own rules. First one, after lunch the phone goes to rest. It's my sacred time to do crochet, watch the birds in the backyard, talk to God. "But Mom, what if someone needs you?" my daughter asked, worried. "Honey, nobody died from waiting a few hours for an answer in the old days. The world won't end if I don't respond right away." In the senior group, we even started a campaign, Phone Free Tuesday. At first it was difficult. It felt like something was missing. But you know what we discovered? The conversations became deeper, the laughter more genuine. Mrs. Edith, who's 85, shared something interesting. When we were young, we suffered from lack of information. Today, we suffer from excess. We have to find the middle ground. One night, I had my great-granddaughter Alice on my lap. "Grandma, tell me that story about when you were little." "Not now, my love. Grandma's watching some videos here." She closed my phone with her little hand and said, "But Grandma, your stories are more fun than those videos." It was another moment of reflection. How many stories do we leave untold? How many moments do we miss by being stuck in this virtual world? Today I keep my cell phone, of course. It's wonderful to be able to see photos of grandchildren who live far away, make video calls with family, receive loving messages. But I've learned to balance. I created a routine. In the morning, I check important messages. During the day, I only check my phone 3 times. At night, after 6 p.m., it goes to rest. As I tell my friends, the phone has airplane mode, but life doesn't. If we don't disconnect from time to time, we end up missing the journey. At the last family gathering, my daughter-in-law commented on how different I was. "Mrs. Mary, you didn't even touch your phone today." "It's because I discovered that the best moments in life don't fit on a phone screen, my dear." And it's true. Now when my grandchildren come to visit, I put the phone in the drawer. I prefer to see their smiles in person rather than through photos on WhatsApp. When I'm with my friends, I leave the phone in my purse. Life gossip is much more flavorful. As I told my friend Zoe the other day, you know what the best app in the world is? It's called Real Life, and it doesn't need internet to work. 5. Staying stuck in old roles and labels. For a long time after my Joe passed away, I saw myself only as the widow of Joe from the grocery store. It was as if my identity had been frozen in that role. I wore only dark clothes, didn't go to parties, avoided any kind of fun. I thought that's what was expected of me. I remember a difficult conversation with my daughter Martha. "Mum, it's been 5 years since Dad left. You can't keep living like this." "Like what, honey? I'm respecting your father's memory." "Respecting or hiding? Do you think Dad would want to see you like this, locked up at home living only on memories?" Those words struck a chord, but the real change began on a Sunday afternoon when my 7-year-old grandson Lucas found an old photo. "Grandma, who's this pretty lady in the colorful dress dancing?" It was me about 30 years ago at a summer festival. I barely recognized that wide smile, that joy in my eyes. "That's Grandma, sweetie." "But Grandma, where's that lady? I've never seen you so happy." It was like a mirror shattered in front of me. What had happened to that Mary who danced, who laughed loudly, who wore colors? I was so stuck in the role of widow that I'd forgotten all the other roles in my life. It was my friend Connie who gave me the first push. "Mary, there's a senior dance at the community center on Saturday. Want to come?" "Me? A widow at a dance? No way, Connie." "Since when does being a widow mean you can't dance? Come with me, woman." I was very reluctant, but I ended up going. I put on a black dress, of course, but when I got there, I saw Mrs. Edith, also a widow, all dressed up in floral prints, dancing and smiling. "Mary, death takes our loves, not our lives. Come dance." That night, after years, I danced again. At first I felt guilty, but gradually I remembered how good it felt to move, to smile, to live. The following week, my granddaughter Alice invited me to paint. "Grandma, there's a painting class at the community center. Don't you want to try?" "But honey, at my age, I've never picked up a paintbrush." "So what? You'd never been a great-grandmother before I was born, and look how good you are at it." I started painting. At first, they were just smudges, but each brushstroke seemed to take away a bit of that heavy cloak I'd been carrying. From dark canvases, I started using colors. From wilted flowers, I moved on to painting entire gardens. My painting teacher, Mrs. Yvonne, 82 years old, told me something I'll never forget. "Mary, life is like a blank canvas. It doesn't matter how old you are, you can always start a new painting." Gradually, I rediscovered who I was beyond the labels. I went back to the church choir, started water aerobics, joined a volunteer group that tells stories at the children's hospital. One day, I was tidying my wardrobe when my youngest daughter walked in. "Mom, what a beautiful dress. I didn't know you had colorful clothes." "I just bought it, honey. I'm tired of only wearing black." "But what will people say?" They'll say your mum finally understood that she can be Joe's widow and still be Mary. The two things don't conflict with each other. In the widow support group I attend, I always say, losing someone we love is like losing a piece of our heart. But the heart keeps beating, and we need to learn to dance to this new rhythm. Today, at 78, I'm so many things. Yes, I'm a widow, but I'm also a beginner painter, a storyteller, a water aerobics student, a volunteer, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a friend. As I told my granddaughter last week, life is like grandma's old wardrobe. There's room for lots of things, we just have to not get stuck in the same drawer all the time. At the last family party, my older sister commented, "Mary, you're so different, so light." It's because I finally understood, sis. There's no age limit to reinvent yourself. Each day is a chance to discover a new role in our story,